a lot of auditions for juries, youth orchestra, honor band require sight reading. And for some people, sight reading can be very scary and very difficult. And for some people, it's fun, right? And I'm one of those people who loves sight reading. It just gives me like this weird adrenaline rush. I don't know how to explain the science, but I really enjoy it. And as a professional musician, you need to be very good at sight reading because sometimes you don't have so much time to learn everything. So you just need to be able to, on the spot, you get a call 2 hours later, you're playing the show, right? So sight reading is super important. It's gonna help you a lot to be a good sight reader. And I have some tips to make you better at sight reading. So I tell my students the number one rule of sight reading is check the key signature, because you don't want to start the piece and then realize halfway through, oh, I messed up the key signature and now I have to restart, okay? That brings me to rule number 2, which is that you don't want to restart, right? So in an audition, they're expecting that you're not going to play it perfectly, but they don't want you to have to restart and restart. That will actually probably take points away from you. So you just have to be like, okay, well, I missed that note. I'm just going to keep going, and I'm going to make sure from now on that whenever I see an F, it's an F sharp, right? So that's the number 2 rule, is you don't want to restart. Number 3, don't start at a faster tempo than you can play comfortably. And if you're not sure, then go a little bit slower, because if you start at like this like vivace tempo and then it gets to a trickier section and you have to change the tempo, that is worse than keeping a consistent but slow tempo. Remember, you are sight reading, so you're not really expected most of the time to play at the tempo that's written, unless it's like something a bit slower, if that makes sense. Or if you can do it at the tempo that's written, that's great. But I always think it's better to start a little bit slower with whatever you're reading and then go from there. Now, usually when you're sight reading for an audition, let's say, they give you like a minute or 2 to look through the piece. So what I do is check the key signature, check the tempo marking, right, to know if the piece is a fast or slow piece. And then what I'll do is I'll look through and I'll look at any parts of the piece that look more challenging. And then I try to work through them thinking about rhythm words. So like 1, 2, 3, 4 for quarter notes. For 8th notes, I think 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. And for 16th notes, 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a. So just all those little rhythmic tricks that we have to be able to subdivide and make sure that I'm going to play it correctly. Now, something I encourage my students to do too is to really try to feel, let's say we're in 4/4, the quarter note beats. So there's no shame in tapping your toe when you're sight reading and helping yourself feel those solid quarter note beats. Now, how can you practice sight reading? Well, number 1, you should know how to identify notes, right? If you're someone who struggles with identifying notes, there's so many applications nowadays that can help you with that. So I really love the app Staff Wars, and this is not sponsored, but I have all my students get this app because it's kind of like Star Wars, and the notes will like shoot out at you and then you have to identify the note, and it's kind of a fun way to practice. And then as you get better, it speeds up, and so it's a nice little fun game to practice your note identification. There's also musictheory.net note identification. So that one is not as exciting, but it will get the job done. It'll give you a random note and then you have to say which note it is. And if it's wrong, it'll give you the red. And if it's right, it'll give you the green. So it gets the job done as well. And they do have challenge mode. So you can challenge yourself to do a certain number of questions in a certain amount of time. So that's a good way to practice it too. If you're someone who struggles with rhythm, you can practice sight reading daily, right? So what I like to do with my students is give them a new etude to learn every week. So every week they're learning a new piece or a new song with different rhythms. So I think that's also an excellent way to work on your rhythm. When working on rhythm, it's really helpful sometimes to clap it out and to count it out, right? So those words that I mentioned before are really helpful when you're figuring out how to subdivide. Another fun way to practice sight reading is playing duets with your friends. So you can just get like one of those duet books. It could be even with friends who are a different instrument than you, and you just play through them together. And the more you do it, the easier it gets. So good luck in your sight reading journey, and make sure that you are practicing that, because you don't want to get to those auditions and then be like, I can't do sight reading, right? You want to be prepared, and it's just something you can incorporate in your daily practice routine. I hope that was helpful, and make sure you are subscribed to my YouTube channel. Thank you.